Our first panel will start with the hottest buzz that is always in every corporation's minds, regardless of size and scale. What is the crown jewel of digital? Or what investors look for in ideas and enterprises they support? We would like to know what many of our budding businesses need to succeed, need to succeed and transform into unicorns that they aspire. Moderating the panel here would be Miss Amor Maclang, convener of the World FinTech Festival Philippines. Miss Amor, take it away.
Thank you so much, Chino, and thank you to our panelists and friends. In the United States alone, there were a total of 30.7 million small businesses recorded in the previous year. And half of these businesses that employ people survive for only 5 years. And in the case of COVID, the numbers probably are even more dire. With a highly competitive playing field that startups are in, securing funding can truly be very daunting. And to hurdle this challenge, ideators and entrepreneurs must ensure that apart from being profitable, they should establish their story, their impact, and their relevance, among others. Our guests for today have been through the rough and tumble of the startup world and the technology world, succeeded in scaling up, and birthed businesses that have gained or are gaining recognition outside of the country. It is my pleasure to introduce them to you today. Our first panelist is a very known investor, an adopted Filipino who believes in the Philippines and our startup scene, and someone who's very dear to me, Mr. Ron Hos, the founder of Coins.ph, one of the first cryptocurrency platforms established in the country, and has since grown as a mobile payment solution for remittances, load, bill payments, and online shopping. Ron has been assigned to chair the Union Bank's Market Risk Committee, and we're also proud to have him as advisor in FinTech Philippines Association, where I'm both trustee and executive director. He was also named as a member of the committee's Operation Risk Management, Corporate Governance, and Technology. But moreover, to me, he is a supporter of the government's COVID response via the DOH. Ron?
Thank you, Amor. I'm very excited to be here and very excited for the discussion that we're going to have.
Ron is currently right now locked down in La Union. I couldn't imagine a better place to be locked down in. Now, our next guest is Mr. Mark Vernon, the founder and CEO of Tagcash. This gentleman is one of the earliest people in the community I've met some 2-3 years ago. And I always fondly referred to him as one of the founding fathers of FinTech in the country, along with Ron. And he spends his time in between Europe and the Philippines, building bridges between both. Mark has been featured as an investor judge on the final pitch for 2 seasons. This is on CNN, and has invested in many Philippine-based startups. He also co-founded and is the vice chair of the FinTech Foundation, a group that was founded in 2017. Hi, Mark. Everyone's wanting to know what you've been up to. Mark?
Yeah, well, I've been out to Philippines for a few months now, since August, here in Cyprus. As you said, trying to build bridges between Philippines and Europe. And I also plan on trying to build a few bridges from Africa as well. But I have a feeling there's not so many bridges between Philippines and Africa, but who knows? So yeah, been playing around over here. It's the market over here in Europe is it's a little bit different. In fact, in some ways, Philippines is more advanced than Europe, especially with its attitudes to cryptocurrency and so on.
Thank you very much, Mark. Our next speaker I'm very happy to introduce Miss Joan Sibyl Yao. We met a few years back, and interestingly enough, Joan, I was actually with Michael Tulim. We also convened the NICP conference today. You know, Mark, before there was FinTech, there's been the BPO ICT sector, and what we're trying to do now would be bring those two communities together. Everyone knows Joan as Miss Kickstart, right? And we'd like to thank her and her parent company Globe for actually helping make this a World FinTech Philippines stage possible. Joan?
Thank you so much, Amor. Nice to see you in this life, as in our previous lives.
Yes.
So hi everyone. I'm Joan. I lead the investments team at Kickstart Ventures, which is the Philippines' largest corporate venture capital fund, backed by Globe Telecom and the Ayala Corporation, one of the country's leading conglomerates. So earlier this year, we were happy to launch a $180 million fund, a new fund called the Active Fund, which looks to invest in Series A to C startups worldwide, which are of strategic relevance to the Ayala Group. We're looking to invest in the future of transactions, the future of work, the future of resources, and the future of living spaces. So I'm looking forward to talking more about that together with the rest of the panel later on. Thanks very much for having me.
I think, Joan, we should have a separate discussion. Ron and I recently launched the PropTech Consortium of the Philippines, where we're really looking at future of living and future of work, because real estate is really one of those industries that could benefit from DX. Thank you, Joan, and we'll hear more from you later.
Thanks, Amor.
Yes. Our next guest is Mr. Matt Kolling, the Chief Investment Officer and of UBX. And he will also play a key role in raising capital for UBX while assisting the company in key corporate transactions, including the structuring of JVs and acquisitions. And I personally wanted to invite Matt in order to talk about his perspective and the Aboitiz Equity Ventures perspective into investing into startups, right? What is the perspective of big corporate? And we'd like to hear that conversation. Matt?
Thank you. Yeah, as you say, in addition to being CIO of UBX, head of venture investments, and so have the pleasure of working with some fellow panelists as well on that. I'm calling in from Davao in the southern Philippines, where I've been since March. I'm relatively comfortable here, and you know, we're hanging in there. But yeah, I'm looking forward to, you know, I guess the investment focus, you know, UBX and the Aboitiz Group. It's a strategic investment as a non-lead investor, and on the Aboitiz side, it's a global mandate, and we write a little bit larger check size than we do on the UBX side. UBX is global mandate, but to date, our investments on the UBX side have all been local, and on the Aboitiz side, they have all been overseas in North America, Europe, and other ASEAN countries. But I'm looking forward to sharing my perspective on these as it comes around on the panel. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Matt. Our last guest is Mr. Chris Kaptein, a partner at Integra Partners, investing in early-stage fintech companies in Southeast Asia. Chris is also an advisor to the board of UBX, the digital arm of Union Bank of the Philippines. Chris? Chris, I'm afraid you're on mute.
Apologies. Thanks for having me, Amor and fellow panelists. It's great to be here. We run a regional fintech fund focused on Southeast Asia. We have 19 portfolio companies to date in the region. My last 3 investments have all been in the Philippines. I am a big fan and a big believer, and hopefully we got there on time, because I think this year a lot of things are changing, and if we couldn't change them by ourselves, certainly I think COVID is helping push an agenda for digitization and for a lot of startup founders in the market. So let me state that my hope is that the next 3 might also be in the Philippines, and there's a lot of exciting stuff going on. Aside from our work as a standalone fund manager, we're also working together with Matt and his colleagues at UBX, and it's great to work with corporates, that really believe in an open ecosystem and believe in building partnerships with startups and corporates and SMEs in the Philippines, and contribute a little bit to making that happen. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Chris. Now let's get started. Whenever many of you probably heard that a great deterrent perhaps to coming into the country would be certain reputational risks that have come about. So what I'd like to hear from all of you would be your perspective on the environment, the enabling environment, or whatever your thoughts might be when it comes to doing business in the Philippines. So what has your experience been as either a startup or as an investor? And since we're broadcasting to the rest of the world, what we're hoping is to give those looking out, hoping to come in, a perspective into how to do business here and how hard, challenging, or easy it's been for you. Who'd like to start? Ron, would you like to start? Ron, I'm afraid you might be on mute.
Oh, hey, I am. Thank you. So yeah, I mean, I think it does vary from industry to industry and like the specific opportunity that you're pursuing. But it is an emerging market, and that comes with certain advantages and certain disadvantages. I think some things might take slower than maybe in the US, like registering a company or certain like bureaucratic things. But on the other things, some others, there's things that work much faster in this market. So being able to reach decision makers, partnerships, collaboration, I think actually the rate in which it happens is actually a lot faster in other places. So you just have to be cognizant of the differences, and and as an entrepreneur, just obviously try to make the most of make the most out of the situation as it is, right? So but there are actually, I always look at it, I just see advantages, and even when in the places where there are inefficiencies are usually opportunities for innovation, right? So
and that is exactly the kind of perspective that we were hoping to hear. When you talk about inefficiencies to technologists, that's really more like a honey to them that will bring them in. Maraming salamat, Ron. Matt, do you have a perspective into this?
Yeah, absolutely. I echo what Ron said. About the we've got an educated, affordable workforce, English speaking, if that matters to you, that does end up bringing in some funds and some interest from certain industries, around the world. And what I've found is that because people have you can get aligned with the right people that have an experimental perhaps mindset and have the longer road view. Not everyone's looking to monetize their first trade, their first sale in the way that you might find in a more saturated market. And that makes it easier to collaborate, and to also just everyone here on this call has gone above and beyond what their job description formally is or what their paycheck reflects in terms of building the ecosystem as well as specific startups. And so when you have dedicated folks who have brought relevant experience from industry, or who have kind of imported it on their own from experience in other markets as well, it's really promising to have that degree of cooperation, collaboration as well. And we're talking, Kickstart Ventures, I think 2012. The journey, yeah. I mean, talk about yeoman's work of absolutely just setting it out. That kind of thing. That build the
PowerPoint
ecosystem.
and a dream.
Let's get it going. Yeah. So I'll stop. But yeah. So it's been exciting to be able to link up with folks. And like I said, in one way or another, I've collaborated with everybody that's talking here today. And there's a lot more to come. And come join us here when you can. I'll get you a travel pass if you need.
Yes, I'll also try to help you with that if at all possible. Thank you so much, Matt. And when we were first working in this space, did you know that Davao actually hosted the first WordPress? They were the first WordPress initiatives, Google initiatives. Davao is a very special, where you're transmitting from is a very special city. First free Wi-Fi, extremely educated workforce, and I truly envy you. A few minutes away from the beach. Chris, being domiciled in Singapore,
Yeah.
how do you evaluate the environment, especially the regulatory environment here in the Philippines, and how conducive is it for people like you?
Well, there's a couple of aspects. I think first of all, regulators in the Philippines are very approachable. If you want to go speak with somebody at the BSP in FinTech in particular, that's possible, and they're actually really engaging with the ecosystem, which is great. So I think that's good. Second, I think in contrary to few other markets, there doesn't seem to be a big kind of domestic fight going on as to who should regulate what. I think it's in financial services. It's pretty well organized. What you need for fintechs to scale is a few things, right? You need a well-functioning, real-time payment system that settles instantly and that is interoperable, meaning that banks can connect to it, but also wallets or non-bank financial institutions. And I think Philippines has made a start with that, and COVID has shown that that is definitely the way to go. And I think that will accelerate and improve from here. Second, what you need is everybody, whether you're an individual like you and me, or whether you're an SME or a corporate, you need to have a digital identity that maps kind of one-to-one with your physical or your real-world identity. And certain aspects of the financial services ecosystem in the Philippines still don't have that today. So, for example, you want to open a brokerage account, you still need to do an in-person KYC. And some of this is holding back the opening of bank accounts for the masses and the underbanked that is still represent a very large proportion of the Philippine population. But this is also getting addressed today by regulators. And then third, I think top down, in the Philippines, when you wire money from one bank to another bank, depending on which banks those are, you still pay quite a hefty fee to take money out of one ecosystem and move it to another ecosystem, which is really a deterrent for, frictionless financial services. And this year, BSP has forced the waiving of fees on InstaPay, and hopefully that's kind of sets the trend for the future, because really, bank transfers should be free or near free, whether you're moving them within one bank or whether you're moving from a bank to a wallet or from place A to B. So, and what we see this year is an enormous acceleration driven by necessity. But I think a lot of light bulbs have gone off with lots of people that are important to the further progress, of this project. And I'm super excited about what the next kind of year and the future years will bring. So it's getting better. It's pretty good already. It's getting better, and I think it will accelerate dramatically in the next 12 to 24 months.
Don't you just love the amazing power of no choice, right?
Yeah.
That has brought us to where we are. Interestingly enough, InstaPay has reported a 752% increase in its transactions over the past few months, obviously due to COVID. And you're absolutely right in terms of the regulations. Many of the industries are actually looking to the BSP in terms of how it is to work more closely with the private sector in a test and learn approach. Thank you, Chris. Well, we'll get back to you in a bit.
Yeah.
I have a question for both Mark V and also Ron here. The competition among e-wallet services in the Philippines has really been high. Interestingly enough, I think was it last Monday, Martha Saison of Gcash has reported that they've reached 1 trillion in transaction volume this year. Joan, right? Correct me if I'm mistaken.
That's correct.
Right now, 1 trillion. I was almost expecting Ernest to go Austin Powers on me yesterday. 1 trillion pesos. And for those in this segment, no, Mark, you're one of the pioneers here with Tagcash, and of course, Ron, you founded Coins.ph. Two things. Our work is still a long way off. What are the barriers to mass adoption, which is our collective objective in FinTech Philippines Association? That's the first. What are the barriers to mass adoption? And what else could these e-wallet players do to change their game in order to bring in more support and more investments? Mark, would you like to start?
Sure. Yeah, I was going to answer the first question. Well, the reason I went to Philippines in the first place was, 8 years ago was investment. Retired but wanting to invest and do something with my knowledge, and it was interesting to work with people at the beginning of the startup journey. I'm an angel investor, not a venture capitalist, so I like to get in there very early, and then I can give the benefit of any experience I've got over the last 30 years in IT, in tech. So one of the first things I noticed was the lack of payments ease, especially my interest of micropayments and consumption in small amounts. So that was my interest right at the beginning, and that got me into cryptocurrency as well as an alternative, etc. But one of the big challenges for e-wallets is, especially now there's quite a few and a lot of money being coming in for the big players. Is how do the small players like us, make a dent, make a difference? How do we stay alive and so on? And the trend has been over a number of years to build super apps. Basically, a reason why people will use e-wallets. It's not good enough just to have an e-wallet these days. You've got to have a reason to use it, and that's when you're talking about mass adoption. People like Grab, Gojek, and in China, you can follow the example of China, which is what they're bringing in with their investments over here in the Philippines, is the use of a super app to bring in people for different reasons. So whether it's transport, deliveries, on online shopping, there's a reason why you should go in to use a particular product. And I think the e-wallets that will stay alive longest will be the ones that give you a reason to use your money. And that's another reason, those reasons will bring people or move people from cash into digital money. One of the things I noticed over here in Europe is I bank with Revolut, and I've learned a lot from their user experience, and I'm going to be applying that in the Philippines, is that when people put money into a wallet here, they then look for ways to spend it. Whereas in Philippines, it's more like they get money into a wallet and they look for ways to take it out, cash out. How can I cash out and then get the cash from it? So we've got to figure out reasons why they should stay within the digital system and not, take the money out as cash. That's a challenge. But business use cases for e-wallets, that's where the growth is for me.
Amor, you're on
You're
mute,
on,
I think.
you're on mute.
Oh, that's my chronic problem. I don't know about you guys, but I have not touched cash in 8 months, right? But you're absolutely right, Mark. Here in the Philippines, the impetus is to really do a cash out, and yes, so we need to start looking at ways to keep them more in the system. Ron, like I said earlier, there's an urban legend going around that I'd like you to corroborate or disprove. Many say that as an angel investor, you've invested in thousands of companies and you've absolutely lost track of most of them. Could you talk a little bit more about that? What are you looking for when you invest?
The thousands is definitely not true, but I've definitely invested in a couple, and I've been part of funds who've invested in more. But yeah, I mean, I would say obviously, in first thing investors typically look for is financial returns, right? Most investors invest either for strategic value or for financial returns. I think increasingly investors are also looking at the impact of the companies that they're investing into. So that's at a very broad level, right? But then you start to decompose what are things that tend to drive that, and obviously you need to, you're looking for companies that are tackling like big problems and big opportunity spaces where there's, they can grow and build a substantial business, and have something unique to offer in their product. Basically an unfair competitive advantage, either a technology or something that they've built or a methodology that other teams don't have. And I think for me, most importantly, the thing that's kind of the piece that's most consistent between successful companies, it's going to be the people that are in the company. Just the core DNA of the founders and the first kind of layer of people around them, in terms of both the values that they represent, that they bring to the table, and their motivation, and obviously their skills and expertise. So sometimes you see a mediocre team successful on successfully executing on a big opportunity, but it's more often that you see a great team tackling a mediocre opportunity and then making it to something that's way bigger than what you'd actually expected. So that would be, for me, that's the number one thing that I look for, is really the people that are in the company.
Absolutely, the people and the values. Thank you, Ron. I saw Joan nodding her head, especially as Ron is talking about values and investing in people. In your experience, Joan, what are the large addressable problems that startups are challenging, that Kickstart has been helping them with? What are the top challenges? So hoping that many of the startups who are listening in can help avoid them. Joan?
Thank you so much, Amor. No, I was nodding my head, right? Because I think 2020 has been an exceptional year. And, it's subjected companies...
Isn't that an understatement, huh?
It's subjected companies and founders and teams to extreme pressure. Whether it's because of hyper growth. So, some companies have actually been net beneficiaries of everything that's happened, particularly if you're in the digital space. Or the opposite. Things have been more challenging if you are in a space, for example, like travel or like offline retail, where it's been a bit tougher for you. In either case, it reveals a lot about like teams, about founders and what they're made of. So it's been super interesting for us also this year to see how founders have reacted to all that. No, so in terms of challenges that we've seen our founders deal with this year, as mentioned, there are the challenges of hyper growth, right? So where you grew, we had a company that blew past their 2020 end of year target in the middle of the year, right? And that presents its own unique challenges. Hiring people to continue to sustain that quality and level of growth. To just on the regulatory side, touching on the earlier topic, just making sure that you are set up correctly from a legal perspective as you're growing, so that you don't run afoul of any foreign ownership restrictions and things like that. That's also been an area. Of course, you can't talk about 2020 without kind of fundraising, challenges and strategy. We find that, again, the most responsive and most mature founders were able to be honest with themselves at the start of this pandemic and say, okay, my business is going to be affected in this way, and this is how I'm going to have to contingency plan, given this scenario and this scenario. And so, knowing when to cut burn, when they needed to cut burn, knowing when to raise a bridge, if they could raise a bridge, and even in some cases, knowing when they had to fold or sell the company. So we've really seen the myriad outcomes this year.
Thanks, Joan. Matt, Joan said something about the challenges of scaling, specifically when it comes to hiring to sustain the growth. The talents found here in the Philippines and even in Asia Pacific in general are bankable and promising, and which has resulted in positioning the region as one of the tech hubs in the rest of the world, right? Many people have been talking about an Asian tech era. I mean, last year there were a lot of talks, Trump versus China, banning Huawei, for example, in the United States due to security concerns, or even, interestingly enough, Zoom, which is an American company, right? It's actually an American company led by a Chinese American. Now, I'd like to get your thoughts on the seeming shift of tech power from the West to Asia. I wanted to get your thoughts and actually the rest of our panelists. Matt, let's start with you.
Sure.
The shift of the sphere of power.
Sure. My view on it is there are so many use cases. There are a lot of needs, a lot of pain points, and we've got a different demographic than some of the traditional tech power centers. It requires innovation and invention, as well as the environment to be set. That includes things like regulatory, in order to be able to justify providing these things that are pretty much a humane thing to be able to offer people to be able to live your lives. When you talk about even requiring smartphone-based contact tracing QR, Ron knows about this and is likely fixing any discrepancies or things that come up. But if you were to say, and I think there was a brief window that maybe if it got closed, Ron probably was the one who closed it, where 37% of the country wasn't going to be able to move around if it was mandated to have smartphone-based QR code contact tracing. These are everyday apps. Is that monetizable directly? Someone got paid a little bit to actually develop it, but we have the ability to invent, use data, reach people, make decisions, make proxy decisions, and really modernize the way that things have been done more traditionally. These use cases, are the things that spur that innovation, and that will there are inventions, models, inventions, and insights that will travel well back to other markets as well. And so that's where in addition to the relatively young population that is going to benefit from these things, these inventions as well. So I think that is looking towards the future. why you could argue that the power center, because if you're investing, you're not investing in today, you're investing in 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and that there's a lot of wind at our backs, and that is that's very promising for Asia and for the Philippines.
Chris, is the fact that you've moved from the West to Asia an affirmation of that shift in the balance of power for tech? Chris,
Mute.
you're on mute.
I've been here for 16 years, and I moved when I finished school. So I'm afraid I cannot argue that it was any kind of foresight or anything to do with technology. I mean, if it to your question, I think you can split it into different pieces, right? So if you look at the hardware side of things, I'm dialing in from an iPhone. I have a Microsoft Surface in front of me. My wife works on a MacBook. My kids have iPads. So I don't think that's going to change. It's not like we're going to use an Indonesian or a Filipino device anytime soon. There will be competition from China. So I think in Southeast Asia, we're in some kind of a proxy war where we get offerings from both sides in the next decade, right? Then if you look at cloud, like all of us are either on AWS or we're on Azure or maybe we're on Google. These are all also either Western ecosystems, or maybe you're on Ali or Tencent or something like that. So then the local innovation is really kind of what you build on top of that, right? So you take the infrastructure and the hardware that's provided by either China or the US, and then you build local software on top. And I think this is really where the big opportunity is. And one of the really encouraging things is that we're seeing SaaS companies get started locally. So we've gone away from just marketplaces and just e-commerce and just transactions to also people building software as a service that is being used either by individuals or by SMEs or corporates. And my hope is that when we're on this panel 4 or 5 years from now, that there is a Filipino SaaS company that's worth $500 million. That would be a great outcome, and I think that's absolutely within the realm of possibility.
Thanks so much, Chris. Ron and Mark. Ron, specifically, we first met in 2017, 2018 in Tokyo. At that time, Coins.ph was one of the leading FinTech startups dabbling into crypto. Now, even with the introduction of peso-backed stablecoin, the uptake and the general uptake for crypto isn't there still. Why do you suppose?
Do you want me to start on that? I mean, Ron's. I think Ron built
we'll have
Coins.
Mark and then Ron after.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, Ron, but I think Coins.ph grew on the back of Bitcoin for remittances, and in some ways, I'm envious of him doing that faster than I did it. One of the problems I faced over here, setting up an EMI in Europe, for example, which I'm two minds whether to do it or not, is that central banks are really wary about use of cryptocurrency. And you can see that with European central banks' attitude to stablecoins and the fact that they want to regulate everything. And the US's approach to the bill being launched to, or being pushed to regulate stablecoins even more. This is I've had to separate my businesses now, one for e-money and another one for cryptocurrency, and try and keep them totally separate, because when I was going to the central banks, they're saying, if you have anything to do with cryptocurrency, like in Cyprus, when I talked to the advisors on the central bank for EMI creation, they said, if you have anything to do with tokens or crypto, we can't help you. We won't work with you. And here, and same, I had a problem with my Spanish bank as well. They say, if you deal with cryptocurrencies in any way, if you have Bitcoin sales or whatever, we're going to close your account, or we're not going to even open an account. And that's a kind of approach in Europe that's, for me, is backwards. Whereas in Asia, it's a little bit more forward-thinking, and certainly in the Philippines, the central bank has, encourages the use of it. So I can see the, Philippines, other countries around there moving forward faster with the adoption of cryptocurrency than Europe, where regulation stifles it.
Got it. Thank you, Mark. Ron, any thoughts? I remember one of our earlier conversations, and it was in that lunchtime in Tokyo where you said, and I shall not name the bank, Amor, when they found out I was in this business, blank leading bank shut us down, right? So do you think that kind of mindset is still prevailing?
Well, I think kind of if you ask me, you probably hear this in almost every interview I gave, over kind of the 6-7 years that we're building up Coins. I was always first excited about using blockchain, right? So crypto is a product of blockchain, but I think the thing that really enables kind of innovation in financial services is the underlying technology. And I've always said that the best product is one where the customers don't actually know the technology; they're just benefiting from the benefit. They're just benefiting from what the technology provides. And so if you look at it in that, with that perspective, I think there's been tremendous progress. Like if you look at the amount of transactions, even the amount of remittances that are going to the Philippines right now over blockchain, it's much higher than what you'd expect. It's just that customers might not necessarily be aware how the underlying transaction is being settled. And I think the same kind of advances are being made, in many different areas, right? So even that specific bank that you mentioned, it's funny, but they're actually partnering with a very large blockchain-based company, or at least I know they've been in discussion to help them facilitate some of their to work on some of their cross-border activity. So definitely things are changing. I think there's way more maturity in the industry, and right, like banks reasonably don't want to work with crypto or crypto companies or crypto assets in environments where they have no regulatory control, right? There's no AMLA protection and like loose KYC, etc., because that introduces risk into their systems that they don't have tolerance for, right, in how they operate. But I think when implemented properly, right, blockchain and digital assets can be implemented in a way where you actually do have strong controls. I mean, China is doing it now with implementing their own central bank based currency, and you can be sure that there's going to be a number of financial institutions that are going to be on the line to kind of to work with that. And the same I think holds true for a number of different products. So, yeah.
Yes, thanks, Ron, and we shall continue to keep that bank unnamed. I designed an earlier panel sometime Tuesday with actually the two of you in mind, Ron and Mark, but everyone else in the panels feel free to respond. Do you think fintechs and banks, the relationship has come to some sort of stasis here in the Philippines? I know a few years back, if I'd asked the same question, it was still, with the exception of maybe Union Bank, they were going head to head still, right? Banks don't want to talk to fintechs and vice versa. Do you think there's some kind of equilibrium now happening? Who'd like to answer? I'm dying to hear Mark Vernon's response. Go, Mark.
I see, that not really. I don't, the small fintechs, the mindset is still different, and when the fintechs have been like mine, have started playing around with e-wallets, small amounts of money, micropayments, etc. But really, the bank's core, then where they make money is in lending. So I'm also into lending. That's where we make the money. And when there's a conflict there, it's like, okay, well, it's the core business is conflicting there on the lending side. However, there must be banks out there looking at small fintechs to say, how can we complement what we already do? Can we absorb them, etc.? But I still think there's a real mindset difference between banks, corporates, and the more nimble fintechs. If you look over here, then the more nimble fintechs are growing up now. Companies like Revolut, Starling, and so on, and now they're taking on the banks at their own game and winning. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't see them getting on very well. Maybe we'll see if that changes. Now, Ron might have a different view on that.
Who might have a differing opinion? Ron, I
Well,
know you. Oh, okay. Chris and then Joan.
go for it, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, we have 19 enterprise companies in our portfolio. It's not that we don't look at consumer companies, but we just somehow end up more in B2B businesses than B2C. And all these companies partner with financial institutions. A lot of them have financial institutions as investors. And it's crossing the chasm that you need to do as a startup to get to enterprise, and it is incredibly hard, especially when you're very small. I think you have to pretend that you're much bigger than you are. And in many cases, sometimes when you're small, it's better to ignore the FIs for a few years because they could either kill you by asking too many things of you, or they could eat you up, or they could take your model and run and do it themselves. Or I mean, there's a thousand ways to die. But I think ultimately, the way to go is partnership, because the startups need the incumbents and the incumbents need the startups. And there will always be, especially the market leaders tend to have a belief that they are above all of this and that they don't need to bother with any of this. So, hopefully as a startup, you can find a slightly smaller, but more nimble and, an incumbent that has more to prove or more market share to gain, and find a sponsor that's high up enough, not the working level guy that you get on with so well, but someone at the board or on the management team that will sponsor you and like attack from all levels, right? I think that's the game in enterprise, and it's incredibly hard and riddled with failure, but it's necessary and possible. And I think ultimately there are lots of institutions who really wanted to and try to do so.
Yeah. If I can
Thanks,
just,
Chris. Joan, please.
yeah, if I can
please.
just tack on to what Chris is saying, of course, also representing the corporate perspective. I think that there is more openness. I've seen, from different parts of the Ayala Group to work with startups over the past few years. While, of course, some will still prefer to build or try to still build it on their own.
Who
there
does that?
but there are I'm seeing some knowing smiles, right? But I think that after a few iterations, there is also more understanding from even people from corporate that we'll get to market faster, and we can launch faster if we just partner, right? There are things that startups do and want to do that a large company isn't necessarily equipped to do nimbly, and therefore trying to find those win-win partnerships, trying to find those like-minded champions inside organizations. They exist, and I've had the great pleasure of meeting and working with a few of them, people who are trying to develop banking APIs, for example, into BPI. Union Bank, of course, one of the pioneers in terms of trying to be more open. So I think I'm optimistic about it. I guess I have to be, but I'm optimistic about like startups and corporations learning to work with each other better over time.
Great, thank you. Mark, I think the bank should be scared more of the telcos, right? Rather than the fintechs. They're doing credit scoring, lending, insurance, just under everyone's noses.
Yeah, it's
Their job
it's Yeah, super apps led by the big telcos, they've got deep pockets. But the banks, I'm just saying corporations might want to work with startups, but big banks in the Philippines, that's another thing.
That's another thing.
Yeah. I can
Unfortunately,
put a shameless plug here for Union Bank, which I know is
go on, actually,
incredibly
Ron.
interested in working,
Really?
collaborating.
No,
with
Union Bank is different. That's much different.
Let's put it this way: open banking is coming, so you might as well get practice in interfacing with other parties. And if you can't do it with your rival, at least get some practice with the startup that you maybe don't think of as a threat. You can learn something from. You can trade some value, maybe make an investment. There's a lot of different ways. I'm speaking for perhaps those who are behind the curve, as everyone is represented here. We're advocates for the open banking side, and this is about choice, and everyone does what they're good at, right? And that's really key. So it's the future's bright.
If the central bank mandated, like they do in Europe, that all banks must have open banking, that would be a big step forward.
Stay tuned.
Yes. Now, Ron, when the industry heard of your appointment as an independent director of Union Bank, everyone cheered, and we were saying that, wow, fintechs now have a literal seat in the boardroom. So, do you think the relationship is coming to a very happy equilibrium, fintechs and banks?
I think it's a step in the right direction, right? But it shows you that banks are, there's usually, right, like, so fintechs are naturally, potentially, some banks may see them as a threat, right, or as a change. There's a change. Technology is a change of kind of model for how banking is working, right? And there's kind of that old saying that when change comes, there's basically like three reactions, right? There's like frustration, indifference, and innovation, right? So some banks get frustrated and they might shut down your account, right? If you're a fintech or if you're dealing with technology they're not familiar with, right? Some might just sit it on the side and wait, and wait it out, right? And just see what happens. And some actually see it as an opportunity to grow, right? And opportunity to innovate. And I think you can expect that, initially it's going to be a divide, right? And they're going to be the ones that are going to be stepping and running forward. And those are the ones, if you're a startup, that you want to collaborate with. So you find those and you work with them. It's true for any industry, not just for banking. And then eventually, if you're doing the right thing and they're doing the right thing, then everybody else is going to follow, right? So everybody's going to move away from their, kind of sideline positions, right? So I'm optimistic on that front, because I think that the banks who are collaborating with fintech and are embracing technology, my strong belief is those are going to be the ones that are ahead in the game 5 or 10 years from now. And so as that happens, the other institutions are going to, they're going to look and see what's happening, and they're going to probably follow the same playbook.
Hopefully, inshallah, inshallah. Very good. Now, in closing, I'd like to ask all of our panelists, in a post-COVID world, what types of businesses, startups, founders do you hope to see more of? Joan, why don't we start with you?
Wow. Hello. All right. Well, let me pick up from what I was saying earlier, right? In that 2020, again, has been an exceptional year. I think 2020 has been a year that has only accelerated the future, right? So a lot of these things, digital payments, remote work, e-commerce, digital health, these things we could see them coming, and it has only brought things that were a bit further away closer to us now, in the present. So for us, at Kickstart, and the Ayala Group, we're kind of very excited, about the things I mentioned. The future of work, doing it remotely, things that improve collaboration, the future of transactions, whether it's digital commerce, digital payments, education and entertainment also being done digitally. The future of resources and living spaces, Amor, more connected things, right? So in short, I think, and touching on the title of our talk, right, the digital crown jewels, I think it's not just like a crown or a scepter. It's like a whole vault, right? Like I think digital will pervade every aspect of our lives, and there will be multiple winners in this space across multiple sectors. So we're very excited. I think you're on mute.
Thanks, Joan. Matt?
All right. Yeah, I think we're really excited to speak with founders who want to push the envelope, who want to change people's lives, change the world, but they've got evidence to back it up. They've got a roadmap. They've got a right to be there, to be in the conversation, be confident, be coachable, be experts, be good at what they do, surround themselves with good people. But really, it's exciting. Boldness, I think, is a theme. I'd like to hear from more people who are thinking boldly. So come find me if you want to do something big.
Thanks so much, Matt. Chris?
I'm really excited of founders who are taking an obsessive attention to taking friction out of a process in financial services, because ultimately, every piece of friction you have, whether it's in lending or in wealth management or in payments, it leads to drop off, it leads to frustration. And I think this kind of obsession from a product perspective with ensuring that transactions run smoothly is a really good quality. And product, I think we're in kind of the second or the third phase of kind of startup maturity in Southeast Asia, where I think historically in 2015 or 16, a lot of founders who didn't start with a head of product or with somebody on the team, really focused completely on building exceptional products. And we're seeing a lot of companies now that actually from day one, where product, besides of course having a very strong technical team, where product really is like a key obsession to building the most frictionless kind of experience for clients, be they consumers or SMEs. And we see awesome companies in the Philippines in this space who do that, and that's really great to see. And we're excited to partner with them.
Mark?
Yeah, my startup. I'm both a startup guy and an angel investor. So I look for companies or small startups that benefit what I'm doing as an entrepreneur. And that journey in the Philippines started with creating an e-wallet, but it's now morphing into an apps as a service model. So Tagcash is Philippines-based, but I also have companies that for global growth for allowing startups to create digital apps, basically. Digitizing their process or creating a new model, especially for things like micropayments, charging for video consumption, e-learning, stuff like that. So I'm doing my part in trying to help startups digitize whatever they're doing. So for me, the future, I mean, Chris mentioned software as a service. I'm interested in apps as a service, to allow apps to be created, to be rolled out without much technology, and so they can concentrate on the business models, whatever they are. And FinTech is core of all of that. FinTech is the oil that makes things move and allows new business models to come out faster. So it's been an interesting journey, and looking forward to the growth over the next couple of years.
Ron, final word.
Sure. This is the Philippines panel, so I'm gonna give an answer that's specific to the Philippines. But I think I'm really excited about seeing more Filipinos coming back here to start companies, like those ones that are sitting today at, I don't know, Square and managing fraud, or in Facebook, and they're dealing with like big products and technology there, and bring back your knowledge home and make some change. So.
Exactly. Now, this panel is very, very special to me. Before I close, I'd like to thank. I've said this at the beginning of the festival and also during the press conference. Thank you, Mark, Vernon, You actually gave me one of my earliest breaks in FinTech. And especially to Ron Hose, who helped put together this entire festivals program. Thank you for being so generous with your time all the time. And on that note, Cyprus, Manila, Davao, La Union, Singapore, thank you very much. And we to all those watching from all over the world, we look forward to having you here in the Philippines. Daghang salamat. Maraming salamat po. Mashallah.
Thank you.
Mashallah.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank
everyone.
you.
You guys
Thank you.